On Halloween, the line between fun and fear is razor thin. Every year we dress up, we laugh, we pretend to be scared by plastic skeletons and fake blood. But deep down, we all know there's something about this night that feels different. It's the only time when the strange and the sinister are invited right up to our front doors, and we welcome them with open arms. Maybe that's why, even as adults, we can't quite shake the feeling that something real is lurking just out of sight. Tonight, I'm going to share 4 true stories that happened on Halloween. Stories that will make you question what's really behind the mask. These aren't the kind of tales you hear around a campfire or read in a book. These are the stories that stick with you. The ones that make you double-check the locks and wonder if you should have just stayed inside. If you think you know what to expect on Halloween, think again. By the end of this video, you might never look at a jack-o'-lantern the same way again. And if you're brave enough to keep listening, just remember, sometimes, the scariest monsters are the ones that look just like us. Halloween has always been a big deal in my family. Every year my parents would go all out, fake cobwebs draped over the porch, a graveyard of foam headstones in the yard, and a bowl of candy so big it could feed the entire neighborhood. I was 16 that year, a little too old to trick-or-treat, but not too old to enjoy the thrill of the night. My younger brother, Max, was bouncing off the walls in his werewolf costume, and my mom was fussing over the pumpkin display by the front steps. It was the kind of night that felt safe, familiar, and just a little bit magical. The first wave of trick-or-treaters came right at sunset. Princesses, superheroes, a couple of zombies, nothing out of the ordinary. I handed out candy while Max tried to scare the little kids with his best wolf howl. The air was crisp, and the smell of burning leaves drifted in from somewhere down the street. For a while, it felt like every other Halloween. But then, just after 8, the doorbell rang again. I opened the door, expecting another group of kids, but there was only one person standing on the porch. At first, I thought it was just someone from the high school playing a prank. The costume was simple, a long, dark hoodie and a mask that looked homemade, like it was cut from a piece of cardboard and painted with a crooked red smile. The eyes were just 2 uneven holes, black and empty. "Trick or treat," the voice said, was muffled, hard to tell if it was a boy or a girl, young or old. I tried to laugh it off, dropping a handful of candy into their bag. "Nice mask," I said, but they didn't move. They just stood there, staring at me through those empty holes. I waited, feeling the hair on my arms stand up. Happy Halloween," I added, trying to close the door. But the masked visitor took a step forward, blocking the door with their foot. My heart started to pound. "Hey, that's enough, okay? You got your candy?" They didn't answer, just stood there, breathing. I could hear it, slow, steady, almost deliberate. I glanced over my shoulder, hoping my dad would come to the door. But he was in the kitchen, laughing at something on TV. I tried to sound braver than I felt. "Seriously, you need to leave." The masked visitor tilted their head like they were studying me. Then, without a word, they turned and walked down the steps, disappearing into the darkness. I let out a shaky breath, telling myself it was just some weirdo trying to mess with me. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. About half an hour later, the doorbell rang again. I hesitated, but Max was already running to the door, eager to hand out more candy. I followed, my stomach twisting. When we opened the door, the porch was empty. No kids, no parents, just the wind rattling the leaves. But on the top step, there was something new, a small, folded piece of paper. I picked it up, my hands trembling. Inside, written in red marker, were the words, "Let me in." I slammed the door and locked it, my heart racing. I tried to laugh it off for Max's sake, but I could see he was scared too. We turned off the porch light and huddled in the living room, pretending to watch a movie. Every creak of the house made me jump. I kept glancing at the window, half expecting to see that crooked red smile staring back at me. The rest of the night passed in a blur. No more trick-or-treaters. No more knocks at the door. Right. But when I finally went to bed, I found another note slipped under my window. This one just said, "Next year." I never saw the masked visitor again. But every Halloween since, I can't help but wonder if they're still out there, waiting for someone else to let them in. If you think that's unsettling, just wait. Sometimes the real horror is what happens when you leave the safety of home. There's something deeply unsettling about a stranger at your door, especially on a night when everyone's supposed to be in disguise. It's a reminder that you never really know who or what might be standing on your porch. But as terrifying as it is to have your safe space invaded, sometimes the real horror begins when you step outside your comfort zone. Because on Halloween, the things you find beyond your front door can be far more disturbing than anything you'd ever expect. I'll never forget the Halloween when I learned that some dares should never be accepted. It was my junior year, and I was desperate to fit in with a group of friends who thrived on pushing boundaries. We'd spent the early part of the night doing the usual, raiding the candy bowls left out on porches, laughing too loud, feeling invincible in our cheap costumes. But as the night wore on, the conversation turned to the old Marrow house at the edge of town. Everyone knew the stories. The place had been abandoned for decades, its windows boarded up, its yard choked with weeds and rusted toys. Some said it was haunted by the ghost of a little girl who de-vanished there on Halloween night. Others whispered about strange lights and voices, about people who went in and never came out. It was the kind of urban legend that dared you to prove it wrong. When Tyler, the ringleader, grinned and said, "Let's go check it out," I felt that familiar mix of dread and excitement. I didn't want to look scared in front of everyone, so I went along, even though every instinct screamed at me to stay away. We made our way through the dark streets, flashlights bobbing, the air thick with the smell of wet leaves and distant bonfires. The further we got from the laughter and porch lights, the more the night seemed to close in around us. The Marrow house loomed at the end of a dead-end street, its silhouette jagged against the moonlit sky. The front gate hung crooked, creaking in the wind. Tyler hopped the fence first, waving us on. I hesitated, but peer pressure is a powerful thing. One by one, we slipped through the gate and crept up the overgrown path, our footsteps muffled by the thick carpet of leaves. Inside, the house was colder than the night outside. The air was heavy, stale, and every sound seemed to echo forever. Our flashlights flickered over peeling wallpaper, broken furniture, and graffiti scrawled across the walls. We joked and tried to act tough, but I could feel the tension building. It was like the house was holding its breath, waiting for us to make a mistake. We dared each other to split up and explore. I ended up in what must have been a child's bedroom, the walls still faintly painted with faded cartoon animals. There was a broken doll on the floor, its glass eyes staring up at me. I shivered, suddenly aware of how far I was from the others. That's when I heard it, a soft, shuffling sound coming from the hallway. "Guys," I called out, my voice barely above a whisper. No answer. The shuffling grew louder, closer. My flashlight flickered, and for a split second, I saw something move just beyond the doorway, a shape too tall and thin to be any of my friends. My heart hammered in my chest. I backed away, tripping over the doll. The thing in the hallway stopped, and I swear I heard it breathing, slow, ragged, and human. I bolted, crashing through the door and into the main hall where the others were already huddled together, faces pale and eyes wide. "Did you see it?" Tyler whispered, his bravado gone. We didn't wait to find out what it was. We ran, stumbling over debris, shoving each other through the front door and out into the night. We didn't stop until we were back under the safety of the streetlights, gasping for breath, too scared to speak. We never talked about what happened in the Marrow house, but sometimes, late at night, I still see that shape in my dreams, watching, waiting just beyond the edge of the light. And I know deep down that some places are abandoned for a reason. But what if the horror doesn't stay behind in the darkness? What if it follows you home long after the night is over? There's a reason people say you shouldn't tempt fate on Halloween. Sometimes, chasing a thrill or trying to prove you're not afraid can open doors you never meant to unlock. But what's even more terrifying is when the things you encounter out there, stay put. When the horror you thought you left behind starts to seep into your everyday life. Because sometimes the nightmare doesn't end when you walk out the door. Sometimes it follows you home. I've always loved Halloween, but that year, I was determined to outdo myself. I was a sophomore in college, and my friends and I had been invited to a huge costume party off campus. I wanted something unique, something no one else would have. So, a few days before Halloween, I wandered into this little thrift store tucked between a laundromat and a boarded-up bakery. The place smelled like old books and mothballs, and the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. I almost left empty-handed, but then I saw it, a vintage Harlequin costume hanging by itself at the back of the store. It was strange, almost hypnotic. The fabric was faded but still vibrant, a patchwork of deep reds and midnight blues, with gold trim that shimmered in the light. The mask was the best part, porcelain with a painted smile that was just a little too wide, and eyes rimmed in black. I tried it on in the cracked mirror, and for a second I didn't even recognize myself. The old woman at the register watched me with a look I couldn't quite read. "That one's been here a long time," she said quietly. "Some things are better left alone." I laughed it off, paid the $10 and left feeling like I'd scored the find of the year. The first time I put the costume on, I felt different. Not just confident, but almost electric, like I was stepping into someone else's skin. At the party, everyone kept telling me how creepy and cool I looked. I played it up, moving with exaggerated puppet-like motions, making people laugh and squirm. But as the night went on, I started to feel uneasy. The mask was hot and tight, and I kept catching glimpses of myself in mirrors and windows, always with that painted smile, always watching. After midnight, I slipped away from the party to get some air. The campus was quiet, the only sound the crunch of leaves under my shoes. I tried to take off the mask, but the strap caught in my hair, and for a moment I panicked. It felt like the mask was stuck, pressing against my face, making it hard to breathe. When I finally yanked it off, I was sweating and shaking, my heart pounding way too fast. That's when things started to get weird. The next morning, I found the mask on my desk, even though I was sure I'd left it in my bag. My roommate Jess swore she heard someone laughing in our room while I was out. I started having nightmares, always the same, always me in the costume, standing in a room full of mirrors, unable to take the mask off. Sometimes I'd wake up to find the costume laid out on my bed, as if waiting for me. I tried to get rid of it. I stuffed it in a trash bag and tossed it in the dumpster behind the dorm. The next day, it was hanging in my closet, perfectly pressed. I asked Jess if she was messing with me, but she just looked at me like I was losing it. I started skipping classes, too tired and freaked out to focus. I'd catch glimpses of that painted smile in windows and puddles, even in my own reflection. Oh, Wayne Knight. I woke up to find myself wearing the costume, standing in front of the mirror. I don't remember putting it on. My hands moved on their own, pulling the mask over my face. I tried to scream, but the sound was muffled, swallowed by the porcelain. My reflection grinned back at me, wider and wider, until the smile split the mask in two. I woke up in bed, drenched in sweat, the costume gone. But sometimes, late at night, I hear laughter echoing down the hall, and I find gold threads tangled in my sheets. I don't know if it was all a dream, or if the costume is still out there, waiting for someone else to try it on. And if you think that's unsettling, the last story will haunt you long after Halloween is over. It is strange How something as innocent as picking out a costume or carving a pumpkin can twist into something you never saw coming. Halloween traditions are supposed to be harmless fun, but sometimes they open the door to things we can't explain or escape. And if you think these stories have been unsettling so far, just wait. The last one isn't just disturbing, it's the kind of story that will haunt you long after Halloween is over. I never thought delivering food would lead me somewhere I'd never be able to forget. I was a senior in college, picking up extra shifts for a delivery app to help pay rent. Halloween night was supposed to be easy money, everyone ordering in, too busy with parties or trick-or-treating to cook. I'd already made a few runs, the city buzzing with costumed kids and jack-o'-lanterns flickering on every porch. My car smelled like pizza and fried chicken, and I was counting down the hours until I could go home and crash. It was almost 10 when the order came in. The address was unfamiliar. Lantern Lane. I'd never heard of it, but the app's map showed it snaking off the main road, tucked behind a row of old warehouses. The directions were vague, but the tip was huge, and I figured it was just someone who didn't want to deal with the Halloween chaos. I accepted the order and followed the GPS, the city lights fading behind me as I drove deeper into the industrial district. Lantern Lane was nothing like I expected. The street was narrow, lined with overgrown hedges and trees that pressed in from both sides, their branches clawing at my windshield. There were no streetlights, no houses, just darkness and the crunch of gravel under my tires. I almost turned around, but then I saw it. A single house at the very end of the lane, set back from the road, its windows dark and its porch sagging under the weight of years. I parked and grabbed the food, trying to shake off the unease crawling up my spine. The air was colder here, heavy with the smell of damp earth and something metallic. I walked up the path, my footsteps echoing in the silence. There were no decorations, no pumpkins, not even a porch light, just a faded number nailed to the door. I knocked, the sound swallowed by the night. At first, nothing happened. I was about to leave when the door creaked open a few inches. I couldn't see anyone inside, just a sliver of darkness and the faintest hint of movement. "Delivery for, Sam?" I called out, my voice sounding too loud. No answer. I set the bag on the porch and turned to go, but the door opened wider, and a voice, soft, almost childlike, whispered, "Can you bring it inside?" Every instinct screamed at me to leave, but something about the voice made me pause. I stepped inside, the floorboards groaning under my weight. The house was freezing, the air thick with dust, and the faint scent of something sweet, like rotting fruit. My eyes struggled to adjust, but I could make out shapes, old furniture draped in sheets. Picture frames turned to face the wall, a grandfather clock ticking somewhere in the darkness. "Just leave it on the table," the voice said. Closer now. I set the bag down and turned, but I still couldn't see anyone. The door slammed shut behind me, and the room seemed to grow even colder. I fumbled for my phone, but the screen was dead, the battery inexplicably drained. That's when I noticed the photos on the wall, hundreds of them, all black and white, all of people in Halloween costumes. Some looked decades old, others more recent. In every photo, the people were standing in front of this very house, their faces blurred or scratched out. My heart pounded as I realized that in the most recent photo, the person was wearing the same jacket I had on that night. A chill ran through me. I spun around, searching for the source of the voice, but the house was silent. I tried the door, but it wouldn't budge. The windows were covered in grime, impossible to see through. I called out, my voice trembling, but no one answered. The only sound was the relentless ticking of the clock. Suddenly, I felt a cold hand brush my shoulder. I spun around, but there was no one there, just a shadow flickering at the edge of my vision. The air grew thick, pressing in on me, and I felt a wave of dizziness. The photos on the wall seemed to shift, the faces turning toward me, their blurred eyes following my every move. I don't remember how I got out. One moment I was trapped, the next I was stumbling down the porch steps, gasping for air. My car was parked exactly where I'd left it, engine still running, headlights cutting through the darkness. I drove home in a daze, the house on Lantern Lane shrinking in my rearview mirror until it vanished completely. I tried to report the address to the app, but it didn't exist. Lantern Lane wasn't on any map, and no one I asked had ever heard of it. Sometimes, late at night, I dream about that house, the ticking clock, the photos, the voice whispering from the shadows. And every Halloween, I get a new delivery request from an address that shouldn't exist. I never accept, but I always wonder what would happen if I did. Some places aren't meant to be found, and some doors once opened never really close. Halloween has a way of bringing our deepest fears to the surface, turning the ordinary into something unrecognizable. Whether it's a stranger at your door, a dare gone wrong, a cursed costume, or a house that shouldn't exist, these stories remind us that the scariest moments are often the ones that feel the most real. Maybe that's why we love this night so much. It's a chance to face the unknown, even if just for a little while. If you've ever had a Halloween experience that still haunts you, share it in the comments below. And as you carve your pumpkins and put on your mask next year, remember, some masks never come off.